Welcome back here to Live Now from Fox in our continuing coverage of the quadruple homicide on the campus of the University of Idaho. We know an arrest obviously was made Friday in Monroe County in Pennsylvania. That suspect, 28-year-old Brian Silber. He appeared in court today. He waived his right to extradition. He'll be back to Idaho within at least 10 days. We don't know when that's going to take place just yet. Joining us now to discuss this even further is legal expert and analyst Brian Silber. And Brian, thanks so much for being with us. We talked to you earlier this afternoon, right before that press conference with Pennsylvania state police officials. They gave us more details into the arrest. They went into his parents' home. There was about 50 law enforcement officials, so a lot of details. They had to break some doors and windows to get in when they were serving that warrant. Just your initial thoughts, though. This was pretty cut and dry, every kind of day extradition hearing, rather.
So my initial thoughts are I'm sitting here with a lot of unanswered questions. You know, I understand that there's an Idaho law that prevents law enforcement from disclosing the contents of their probable cause affidavit until they get to court or something to that effect. You know, I'm not an expert in Idaho law. I don't practice in the state of Idaho. But it reminds me of a rule we have in federal court where a warrant, until it's served, the indictment part of the case remains under seal. And the indictment is what has all the details of the charges that the person is facing. So I think that's probably the reason why law enforcement has been rather quiet. But still, it begs a question. After all this time, one of the biggest homicides in Idaho history and such a tragic case, you know, we haven't heard any details. All of a sudden, they make an arrest. And the public is left in the lurch wondering, you know, what's the basis for this arrest? How do we know they got the right guy? What's the evidence against him? How bad is it? Yeah. You know, and I think when they finally get to court, I hope law enforcement expounds on the basis for this arrest and why they're so convinced they got the right guy. Yeah.
You know, there was a discussion in the newsroom today amongst ourselves about when Silber is back in Moscow, Idaho, and when he, you know, is arraigned on the charges and then a trial takes place. Do you think it's going to take place in that jurisdiction, or do you think it will be moved elsewhere?
Well, at the present time, I don't see any reason for it to be moved. You know, that's actually a very difficult thing for the defense to accomplish. They certainly would have to go to great lengths to show that it would be impossible for this defendant to find a fair and impartial jury. But I think that's way down the pike at this point. You know, that's kind of putting the cart before the horse. There's going to be a lot of pretrial activity in this case. And I personally think if DNA is an element to this arrest, DNA pretrial litigation is going to be big time.
And there's a really burning question in so many's minds. I've been bringing it up for the past couple of days. But that, of course, is what, if any, was the connection between Silber and the victims? We don't have any clue to that question right now. Did he know them? Did he ever meet them? You know, what was the extent? And so hopefully the probable cause affidavit at least releases something to that effect.
So my role as a trial lawyer is to oftentimes get juries to think about the things they're not thinking of. And to answer your question, I would say, what about the possibility that there is no connection? You know, we have to maintain an open mind. Yeah. And remember, this man is innocent until proven guilty. And the only thing that will change that is evidence. And so far, we haven't seen any evidence. So I don't even know if that's a factor. I don't know if there is a connection or if the connection even makes a difference. You know, if this guy turns out to be some kind of, you know, sociopath maniac, you know, the connection could be he just happened to see them somewhere. Yeah. You know, the range of the importance of that fact can vary from basically nothing to something very significant. But it's yet to be seen.
Yeah, of course, I was talking about a perceived motive. You were talking about there possibly couldn't be one or isn't one, and that even is worse for the parents if it is so random. Right now, though, let's show for our viewers, Brian, this video, body camera footage released by Indiana State Police today of this traffic stop right outside of Indianapolis as Silber and his father were making their way back from Pullman, Washington to Pennsylvania before the Christmas holiday. Have a watch.
realize I stopped you, man. When you were driving by me there, you were a little too close to the back of that semi. About one car between you and the back of this trailer. We're about one car with 10 miles an hour, so we're going 60 or 70 miles an hour. We're about 6 or 7 cars. Oh, you guys did?
Yeah, man. Just sitting there. So,
You guys stopped by a trooper? We don't have any SUVs. It was a county guy. Was it like a black SUV?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. You thought you guys were following too closely?
Okay, and there's this a screen grab still image of the photo of Kohberger and his father in that white Hyundai Elantra. So, Brian, the timeline is important here. The slayings occurred the night of November the 13th. This video of this traffic stop was December the 15th. Kohberger was taken into custody December the 30th. Does this raise any red flags for you that he was stopped 2 times on the way back across the country? There, you heard, following a car too closely and another for high speeds.
Absolutely not. Let me explain why. In my criminal practice, my specialty is actually asset forfeiture defense. And what we see all the time happening literally every day on our roadways, specifically I-70, which is a cross-country highway, law enforcement stops vehicles with out-of-state tags, especially if that vehicle looks like it might be a rental car, and especially if it's driven by a young man around 30 years old. That is the typical profile. And in my law practice, I deal with these cases every single day. And basically what law enforcement is looking to do, they want to find an excuse to pull over these out-of-state and country travelers to see if they have any narcotics on them or large sums of currency. They're looking to seize money. They're looking to seize drugs. It has nothing to do with this guy being a suspect. It has nothing to do with what happened in Idaho. It only has to do with interdiction on I-70. And I believe 100% that's what it's concerning, and it has nothing to do with our case.
Okay, I was also, let's talk about Kohberger's defense here. Members of his defense team, or at least hired by his defense team, were in Moscow today taking pictures of the crime scene. We also know, we've learned a lot about his background, what he was studying. Friends and family members have come forward with statements about his personality, his disposition, demeanor, behavior, and the like. What has, I guess, caught your attention in that? Because some have said he was, quite odd, quite eccentric, somewhat quiet, and then everyone has been fixated on what he actually is studying in grad school. Investigators are going to talk about this, aren't they?
I'm sure they will, but I can tell you as an attorney who practices criminal law across this country, I've been in major jurisdictions, I've been in small jurisdictions, and here's the problem. When you have a small town police department like the Moscow Police Department that doesn't really come across homicide cases, I think this is their first one in 7 years, they came across a crime scene that really is 4 crime scenes in one. That's the first part. The second part is these are very messy crime scenes. Any situation that involves stabbings, especially where the victim is stabbed to death, it's extremely bloody. There's always a struggle. I shouldn't say always, almost always a struggle. And for me as a defense lawyer, I want to see how police handle this crime scene, especially if DNA is going to be a factor, because DNA is fragile. Think of when you go to your doctor, how they handle your blood sample. It goes into a special vial. The vial has a special fluid in it. It goes immediately into a refrigerator. It's transported to the lab, refrigerated, and it's handled with care. If you go to this crime scene and you see footprints all over the place from the police boots tracking in mud, tracking in snow, messing up the crime scene, it raises a lot of questions. And I think if this case is going to rely heavily on DNA evidence, the way they handled that crime scene is going to be very important. So I think the defense team is doing an excellent job by going there, taking what photographs they can, having their investigators look at it, and starting to build a defense to find out where did law enforcement go right, where did they go wrong, and where did the questions lie.
All right, Brian, last question for you. Another burning one so many have is, where's the murder weapon? Hasn't been recovered yet. Maybe it was in the house. No one knows. Law enforcement wouldn't divulge that when asked, but it's still out there.
Who knows? That could be the $1 million question or the $0 question. But frankly, having the murder weapon doesn't really necessarily make a difference. You know, sure, prosecutors want to have that. They want to have a big, ugly knife to show a jury. The defense wants to attack them for not having it. But at the end of the day, when you look at the totality of the evidence, it may not make a difference if the proper verdict is not guilty or if the proper verdict is guilty.
All right, Brian Silber, thanks so much for joining us twice today on Live Now from Fox. We appreciate your insight into this, and we'll talk again.
Thanks for having me.